Okay, in this video we're going to start our discussion of factoring. And to begin our discussion of factoring, I'm first going to do a multiplication problem. If we're going to multiply 3x by this trinomial here, remember what we did is we multiplied the 3x by every single term. Now if we do that, what do we get? 3x times 2x squared. 3 times 2 is 6. X times x squared is x cubed. 3x times x, well that's 3 times 1 is just 3. And x times x is x squared. And we have a minus 3x times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. X times 1, I guess it is x as well. And we get 6x cubed plus 3x squared minus 12x. But what we're doing in this video is we're factoring. That's actually the reverse process of the multiplication that we just did. So we're going to start with 6x cubed plus 3x squared minus 12x. We're going to look at that trinomial and see what we can take out of it. So what we do is we look at each term and we ask the question, what does each term have in common? Well, you'll notice first of all that each term has an x in it. So we can factor an x out. The way that we factor an x out of this trinomial is we write it like this. We're going to take the x out of the parentheses and write inside the parentheses what would you multiply by x to get the thing above it. So in this case, if you took an x out of 6x cubed, you'd be left with 6x squared. If you took an x out of 3x squared, you'd be left with just 3x. And if you took an x out of minus 12x, you'd just be left with a minus 12. Now you can verify that this factorization is true by imagining what would happen if we multiplied this x back through the parentheses. Now if we multiplied this x back through the parentheses, we'd get 6x cubed, that's the first term. We get 3x squared, that's the second term. And we get a minus 12x, that's the third term. So this first line here and this factored second line here are actually the same exact thing. We can even factor this further. You'll notice there's a 6, a 3, and a 12 in these three terms. Those are the coefficients. And it's possible to take a factor of 3 out of each one of those three terms. So we're going to go even further. We're going to leave the x out here, outside the parentheses, but we're also going to pull a 3 out now. Now what happens if we pull a 3 out of the first term? Well, if you divide 6 by 3, you get 2. So you'd be left with the 2x squared. If you divided this 3 by 3, you'd be left with a 1, so you just have a 1x, or just x. And if you divide 12 by 3, you get a 4. So now can we verify one more time that this factorization is actually correct? Well, what you do is you imagine multiplying this 3x back through the parentheses. 3x times 2x squared is going to give you the 6x cubed. 3x times x is going to give you a 3x squared. And 3x times negative 4 is going to give you a negative 12x. So this factorization is true. And you'll actually notice that it's exactly what we started with in the multiplication problem. So in the multiplication problem, we multiplied through our parentheses. And in the factorization problem, we did just the opposite. We pulled out what we could out of the parentheses. Let's try to factor 24x cubed minus 30x squared. Let's see what we can do with that problem. So you can do this all in one step if you want, or I'm going to take 2 steps in this case. The first question I'm going to ask is, what x terms do we have in common here in both of these two terms? Well, there's an x cubed here and an x squared here, meaning we could pull an x squared out of the parentheses. We can't pull an x cubed out because this second term doesn't have an x cubed in it, but we can pull an x squared out. And if we do that, we're left in the first term with the 24 times x. And if you pull an x squared out of this minus 30x squared, you're just left with a minus 30. Now verify that on every step. Make sure that you're doing this correctly by just in your head multiplying the x squared through the parentheses and making sure that what we have in our second line is the same thing as what's in the first line. So we've pulled an x squared out. Can we pull any numbers out? Well, we have a 24 and a 30. What's the biggest factor that we can pull out of both 24 and 30? And I think the answer is 6. So we've pulled an x squared out of the parentheses already, so we're going to leave that there. But we're also going to pull a 6 out now. If we pull a 6 out of 24, we're left with a 4, and we still have that x there. If we pull a 6 out of 30, we're left with 5. So that is how you factor that polynomial. In this case, it was a binomial because it had two terms. Okay, let's get you a quick video quiz. See if you can factor that. Good luck, and I'll see you in class.